Hi folks, it's Ms. Strong here again with demo videos for Unit 1 and Homework 5. I hope that you have already read your notes, you're ready to watch the video, and when we finish up, you'll be ready to go do Homework 5. I want to point out that this is a pretty high valued homework assignment, so pay attention, be careful, that's a lot of points for one assignment. Rules for multiplying and dividing. The last time we met, we talked about adding and subtracting or combining integers. Integers being positive and negative whole numbers, not fractions or decimals. This time we're going to multiply and divide whole numbers that are positive and negative. So we're going to multiply and divide integers. There are some rules that we need to know, and those rules go like this. If you have two positive numbers and you multiply them, you get a positive number. You've been doing that for a long time, since about third grade. A positive times a positive gives you a positive. What you have not been doing, if you multiply two negatives, you get a positive. In other words, two negatives kind of cancel each other out. I think of it as I call it a not. I can say, I'm going to the store. That means I'm going to the store. Then I go, I'm not going to the store. Well, that's one negative sign. And a negative times a positive, if I have just one negative in there, I get a negative answer. That's I'm not going to the store. Now look here. This is I'm not going to the store. Not, a double negative. If you're not going to the store, then you're going to the store. You're positive again. I'm just trying to kind of put it in both a mathematical way and a language way for you. That double negative, we'll see it all the time in algebra, and we need to recognize that not right together like that, times each other, goes away, becomes positive. At the same time, you don't want to confuse that with combining two negatives. So just to be sure, negative 2 and add to it a negative 3, that doesn't become positive. That's combining. And you get a bigger negative. You get negative 5. But as we'll see, if you multiply the negative 3 and a negative 2, you would get positive 5. So it's important to keep the rules separate in your head. And this is what I'm saying. Do you see a pattern? This is the positive negative thing I'm talking about. If I have just 2 sitting here, it's a positive 2. We don't have to put the positive in front of it. If I have negative 2 sitting here, that negative 2 is negative. If I have a negative 2, it becomes positive. But look here, if I have 3 negatives, then it's like 2 of them cancel each other out, but this guy is left over. If I have 4 negatives, again, every 2 are going to cancel each other out, and this becomes positive. That's really a positive 2. So getting used to this idea of positive, negative is really, really important. There are, I was going to say big numbers. There are kind of big numbers up here. You know, I'm not going to worry too much about what 29 times 7 is. I can get my calculator out and do that. What I am going to worry about on this page is whether my answer is going to be positive or negative. That's what really becomes important here. So let's just look at that for a moment. Here is a negative times a negative. That's a double negative. That is a positive answer. This is something we've done forever. 6 times 21, 2 positive numbers. We get a positive answer. Don't let learning something new mess up something you already know. Number 3, a negative times a negative. Again, a positive. Number 4, negative 30 times positive 19. The answer is going to be negative because there's one negative in there. And by the way, it doesn't matter that a 30 is larger. The negative sign could be on the 19. My answer would still be negative. When we're combining integers, it matters which is larger. When we're multiplying, it doesn't. Negative times a negative here is a positive. And then we can think of division the same way, although I will point out this is 6 divided by negative 3. This is how we'd be writing this. And we'd say the answer to that, 3 goes into 6 2 times. There's one negative sign, so the answer is negative 2. Kind of cool? How about negative 42 divided by 21? One negative, so my answer is negative. I happen to know 21 goes into 42 2 times. Notice I didn't bother multiplying all this out. And I don't know how many times 7 goes into 91, I do know that it's two negatives, and you see it, it looks like this, negative 91 over negative 7, and these two go away. So the answer is positive, however many times 7 goes into 91. Okay, negative divided by a positive. Negative divided by a negative, again a positive, although this one I'll point out as well. 27 divided by 27, in case that bothers anybody, the negatives go away, and the 27's reduced to 1, so that's just 1. Whereas 13 divided by negative 13 is negative 1. Okay, you'll need to practice those and keep them separate from when you're combining integers. And I just put in quick slide for what the actual answers were. And again, just playing around with negatives and just to remind yourself when you multiply a string of ones, 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. And this is just to show you a positive times a positive is a positive. A negative times a positive is a negative. 2 negatives is positive. Again, just takes some practice. We can get long strings of them. It doesn't matter. Whenever there are 2 together, those 2 will cancel the negative. Your answer will be positive. These guys will cancel each other, and you'll have a negative answer. So just once you get used to that even odd thing again. Okay, can we do it when they're all mixed together? And this is what I was talking about earlier when I say you really have to be careful with your rules. So negative 8 divided by negative 2 is equal to, well, I see 2 negatives, which is a positive. 2 goes into 8 4 times, my answer is 4. How about negative 3 plus negative 8? This is a situation where I'm combining, and I have a negative 8 score and a negative 3 score, so I don't get positive, I get a bigger negative, and it's negative 11 is my score. How about this minus a negative? Do you recognize that as it's kind of like dividing by a negative or multiplying by a negative? It's that not, and it goes to a positive. So we now have negative 5 plus 1. We have a positive and a negative, and we're combining. So we have to subtract the 2 numbers and get 4, and recognize that the leftovers we're going to have more negatives because the 5 is bigger, so our answer is negative. Last one, a negative times a positive. So positive 9 times negative 7. Well, I know my answer is going to be negative. And 7 times 9 is 63, so negative 63. Not too bad. Okay, here's all those rules kind of, I say, wrapped up in a bow for you. Not going to spend time here. Going to let you look at it yourself, but you might want to use this as reference when you're trying to do problems, and you do need to do some practice problems. This is a really cool site, by the way. I'll put it in your announcement so that you can get to it. It's a fun place to play around with these concepts and just get I call it getting your mind right, getting it straight. We got to do one more thing real quick. Order of operations. I know you guys have seen this before. I hope you guys have seen this before. Do you know how to operate? I hope you do. In math, we have a particular order in which we have to work our operations. The 4 mathematical operations are to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. We also have things like parentheses and exponents. So here's the order. PEMDAS, we sometimes say, stands for please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. We say that because it helps us remember the order that we need to do things in, and that means when we see parentheses, we take care of those first. Then we deal with exponents. Then we look at all the multiplication and division and the whole problem, do all of it. Then we do all the addition and subtraction. So it's important to do it in the same order or you'll get a different answer. So we kind of just say, all right, we're all going to do it in this order. Let's play with one. I have to do parentheses first. I look in and I see parentheses in here and I see something to do inside of it. So I do that. 10 minus 2 is 8. I let the rest of my problem, I say, just come along. I don't mess with it at all. See how I'm just rewriting it? I already did what's inside of those parentheses, so I can kind of let those parentheses go now. That dot tells me I'm going to multiply. I don't want it to look like a decimal. And again, I have to look inside. This time they're brackets, because if I have parentheses twice, I change them to brackets. In other words, these guys are really just parentheses as well, but when I have them twice in a problem, I will use brackets on the outside one. So again, I look at it, I look inside the parentheses, and it's tempting to say 30 minus 8, but that would be doing the subtraction. And what I need to do first is all the multiplication and division. So I have to multiply this 3 times 8 and get 24. Then I'll say 30 minus 24 times 4. So again, just one little step at a time. If I say 30 minus 24, again looking inside the parentheses, I get 6. And this 4 out here tells me I need to multiply 4 times 6, and there's my final answer of 24. Now, if you didn't follow PEMDAS, could get a different answer. You all have to follow the same order. Here's one where I need to evaluate. So I'm evaluating 4x minus 3y if x equals negative 3 and y equals 4. And I think this guy right here is not part of it, so I'll deal with him in a minute. So I need to replace the x with negative 3 and the y with 4. So instead of 4x minus 3y, I'll write 4 times negative 3 minus 3 times 4. And all I did was replace the x with the negative 3, the y with 4. But now I have to follow PEMDAS. And that means I can't do this subtraction yet. And this negative sign is multiplying because of the parentheses and also because here they're just sitting next to each other. So I need to do the multiplication. And just to point out, there are parentheses here that mean multiply, but they're not, there's nothing inside the parentheses for me to do. So as far as PEMDAS goes, I'm skipping on to there's not really any parentheses or anything inside parentheses. There's no exponents, so now I need to multiply. And 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Minus 3 times 4 is 12. And here we have to be very careful. A negative 12 minus a negative 12. Those are both negative numbers. So it's negative 24. And actually I said it wrong. I said a negative 12 minus negative 12, and that's wrong. It's negative 12 minus 12. Sorry. And the answer is negative 24. I wonder, and I'm not sure, so we'll do both. Should I evaluate this guy with the same variables? And I think I will. I'll change colors and say 2 times negative 3 minus, here I'm plugging in for y cubed, so my y is 4, and I'll cube it. In the denominator, I'll put negative 5. I'm going to play with this on the top and get it all simplified, then I'll deal with that negative 5 on the bottom. And I know from PEMDAS that I need to deal with the exponents. So 4 times 4 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 4 is 64. So I'm going to rewrite 2 times negative 3 minus 64 divided by negative 5. Now I look at it again and decide what should I do. I need to do the multiplication. So I'm going to get negative 6 minus 64 over negative 5. And now the top is telling me to combine negative 64 and negative 6. So I'll get negative 70 over negative 5. I'm dividing here, and so negative divided by negative is a positive. And I'm going to use my handy-dandy trusty calculator to say 70 divided by 5 and get about 14. So that's evaluating with PEMDAS. I think that we are just about finished. Oh, these two in particular, I really want to look at really quickly. There's a big difference when the parentheses includes the negative sign and when there are no parentheses. So this negative 2 needs to be written twice because it's in parentheses. So I write negative 2 times negative 2. And I know that a negative times a negative is a positive, and 2 times 2 is 4. So my answer is positive 4, which I just write as 4. Now watch this one. This one doesn't have the negative in parentheses, so there's just one negative sign, and the only thing we write twice is the 5. So it's negative 5 times 5, and this one turns out to be negative 25. Careful with that, and you might want to play around with it on your calculator, because your calculator uses parentheses, and it will give you the right answers and remind you of which answer is right. real quick, I really thought I was almost done. I know this is a long demo. I'm going to talk this through and just tell you this negative sign out here is like multiplying by -1. So we need to say -1 times 3x, so that gives us negative 3x. And then we say -1 times this -2, and a negative times a negative is positive. We have to stop right there because we have a term that has x in it and a term that's constant, and we cannot combine those together. So we're done with that. That is as far as we can simplify it. I cannot stand to leave a problem on the board. So 60 minus 2 times 25. Have to do the exponents first. Becomes 60 minus 2 times 25 is 50. And this becomes 10. Okie doke. There's PEMDAS just sort of in a nutshell for you. Here are the things you should be able to do. We used commutative, associative, distributive properties. We simplified polynomials, and we added, subtracted, multiplied, and divided integers. I hope you know where to come for help when you need it. We will be here to help you, and we look forward to seeing you. Have an awesome day, and go get started on your homework. Bye.